Good morning. Good morning. It's wonderful to see you this morning, and I'm so looking forward to having Yao give us a reflection on Martin Luther King Day. I can't think of a more wonderful way to start my birthday than to be with you all and to listen to Yao and to listen to all of you and to reflect on Martin Luther King, one of my favorite people. And Martin and I have agreed to share our birthdays, uh, and I'm very honored. Martin Luther King Day, wow. I want to give a very special welcome to Yao because I think of Martin Luther King as, in some ways, embodying the spirit of community. And I was thinking that our Help the Helpers group is a community empowerment group. It is part of a cluster of community empowerment groups. And I met Yao in 2018, maybe before that, Yao, but I'm thinking of our time in 2018 when the idea of of having groups that would learn focusing as a way to empower community life. And so we met here in this loft, and people from all over the place showed up for these initial introductions to focusing in community empowerment. And it was just wonderful. It was very magical. Um, People from all different parts of the world and immigrants from all different places and neighbors and everybody. And Yao was one of those people that came, and we did these series of learn focusing, pay it forward projects. And Yao was always sort of the center of a cluster of people that were very engaged in the breaks of talking about what we were talking about. And I asked Yao if he would be one of my assistants or colleagues to help me with this project. And he was delighted to do that, right? Yeah, you said, oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And so um, he has been part of our community empowerment project since then, and had some introductory sessions in his workplace and various other things. But Yao uh, is also an embodiment of community.
Mm.
Um, he said I should introduce him as a cool dude that has worked with me for a while. So maybe I should leave it at that. Although, if I were to tell you all of his his background and credentials, it would take a very long time. But I will tell you, Yao is a meditator, uh, contributor to the Focusing Institute, um, and has an art form of, I forget what it's called, the flower arranging. What is that called, Yao?
It's a version of Akibana. It's called Kado,
Ah, Tado.
the,
Okay.
the, the art of flower and branches.
Wonderful. Okay, so I welcome you. Um, yeah.
Thank you so, so much. Thank you so, so much. Yeah, we are here together. I'm gonna, so let me do this first. sometimes just, one, I love the sound of chimes and gongs. And it's also to a call to just further setting this container that we're having together, this container that you all assiduously participate on these Monday mornings. So I appreciate you carrying it forward with just meeting together and talking, even with a focusing or not I. So here we are, Martin Luther King Jr. I'm going to do just some, I'm going to invite some reflection. I'm going to peel a little bit open what it meant, what it might have meant for Martin Luther King to endure what he has left for us, this legacy. But in real time, he endured an awful lot of pain and suffering. And I'm really speaking from that point of view for all of us who are helpers, whether as therapists, counselors, whether as human beings that have roles as mothers, wives, husbands, partners, sons, daughters, children. What it means, what it takes to endure those kinds of obstacles. So as we begin to plow through, tending to the soil, Dorothy's going to read a couple of passages or one quote or one passage. She's going to delight us with whatever she selected from one of Dr. King's most memorable speeches. So Dorothy, is this a good time for you?
Sure it is.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution, make sure, and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, Black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as their citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us, upon demand, the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and the desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. And there are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied. as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. And then one more. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you so, so much, Dorothy. And thank you, Martin. Thank you, Martin, for your words. I don't even know if you realized, and I'm speaking to Martin, right? I don't know if you realize, Martin, how powerful those words were that day and how much they are today. Let's take a couple of seconds, please. I invite you. Just a couple of seconds. Just to inform you yourself with those brief passages that Dorothy read to us. What was coming up? Where are your thoughts at? You know, there's one thing about hearing that speech now versus times that I heard it much, much, much earlier in my life. We don't really do checks anymore. I mean, yes, you get a paycheck, but we don't really do checks. And it took me back to, wow, when I first learned how to write my own checks out, right? What would it be like for me to have to write and sign off a check for justice? What would it be like for me to write a check for freedom, for fair housing, for food, for health care, for medicine? I would gladly write those checks. So that was one thing that came up for me. Martin Luther King was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. His father took over the ministerial leadership from a very charismatic religious leader in Atlanta, Georgia at the time. Small church, but growing, Ebenezer Baptist. And he quickly became a very influential minister, preacher, civic-minded person, a leader in the community. He, in fact, his birth name was not Martin Luther. It was Michael King Sr. But he changed it to Martin Luther before the Martin we know was born. I want to also speak the name of Martin's mother, Alberta King. Alberta King was also raised in Atlanta from a prominent family in terms of civic mindedness and leadership. And the two of them met and married. She was, at a time in the 20s and 30s, considered highly educated, especially for a black woman. She attended Spelman. She attended Morris Brown. And these were all universities in the Atlanta area. So Martin was born in 1926, I believe. From all accounts, a curious, precocious, smart child. He read everything and anything. His mother exposed him to all things possible. She was also to a noted pianist and organist, on which chair she sat every Sunday at Ebenezer Baptist Church as her husband preached. So I wanted to just give a little bit of that. And remember, I said Martin was very smart. You know, Martin got admitted to Morehouse College when he was 14 years old. He actually skipped his 9th grade and 12th grade year. But Morehouse said, okay, we'll let you in when you're 15. So he entered Morehouse at the age of 15 years old. We know of the many, many, many accomplishments. But there's something particular to those accomplishments that I really want to highlight in our reflections. In 1956, at the age of 25, 26, Martin Luther King was thrusted into the civil rights movement leadership. And so for 12 years, from 1956 to 1968, 12 years, nearly 24/7, and you wonder, well, gosh, how what about sleep? Even in sleep, he was working. But for 12 years, 24/7, he gave 1,000 speeches, average on every year. He spent 2 weeks out of his house, 12 years straight, barely resting, barely allowing himself to resonate with whatever he had just done. What does it take to do help, to be a helper? And that's a question that every one of you can answer. You can tell us what it takes. You can tell us what kind of resilience is necessary to do this work. I want you to think about, just in your mind, a picture of a hotel room, stark as hotel rooms are, a single bed with a man lying in that bed, face up, no pillow, right on top of the bed, in his suit. Just imagine, visualize that. And that person is Martin Luther King Jr. And that visualization, if you're able to bring that up, is often how Martin was before a speech or before a major manifestation. Martin Luther King oftentimes became so debilitated, he couldn't even move. He had to lie down. He had to kind of find whatever that fire that felt so fleeting that can get him up, get him with clarity to speak and hold with people this awesome responsibility of the movement that he is leading. We often type leaders with the impossible. We make them other than human. And Martin was very human. So Martin, I'm old enough to remember that and especially when I became a licensed social worker and then a psychotherapist and doing this kind of work, you know, you don't make evaluations and assessments on public figures or anybody that you have not seen and done an assessment and evaluation. I think they called it the Goldwater Clause. Presidential candidate Goldwater had a history, supposedly, of severe mental illness. But the clause was nobody can really talk about that. So that was allowed. And then also, too, we're talking about stigma. But Martin had chronic depression, debilitating depression. Martin attempted suicide 2 times in his life. The first time he attempted was when he was 12 years old, when a young friend of his died, and it was just too much for him. The second attempt was when he was 13, and his grandmother died. He was fraught with a lot of guilt because he was left to watch his grandmother, but he slipped out of the house to go to, there was a parade, and he wanted to see it. And as he made his way back home, he saw, wow, there were all of these people, and ambulance were around the house. And when he got inside the house, he found out that his grandmother had died. He was fraught with so much guilt and responsibility for her death that he jumped off a second floor enclave. And again, luckily he was not severely injured. So his mother understood the need to really be protective of her son, to really understand that he has a specialness, and she wanted the world to also know that, but she also wanted to protect him. I remember, it's in a documentary, I can't remember the name of it, but Andrew Young, former ambassador Andrew Young, ambassador to the UN, and during Jimmy Carter's presidency, I love Jimmy Carter, that energy. But also mayor of Atlanta. But he talked about something that a lot of people didn't know. Martin had a tic. It sometimes manifested itself in speech or sometimes a rapid blinking of the eye. Ironically, maybe 3-4 weeks before he was assassinated, Andrew made a comment to Martin. He said, "Martin, I haven't noticed that tic. What happened? What'd you do?" And Martin looked Andrew in the eye and said, "I made my peace with God. I made my peace with God." What do you do when you have people calling you, threatening to harm your daughters, your son, your wife? What do you do when your house is firebombed? What do you do when the FBI is calling you and telling you, we're getting ready to reveal that you and Bayard Rustin are having a homosexual affair. What do you do when people who even look like you are telling you, yeah, you shouldn't be doing this? You all, as much as we have streets and schools and all programs and agencies and organizations named after Martin Luther King, up to when that bullet took his life, there was about 60 some odd percent of America did not really appreciate or approve of Martin Luther King Jr. And I'm talking a lot of African Americans. So what do you do? How do you hold that? You talk about the not good enough syndrome. Whoa. So yeah, this was real debilitating for him. This was really difficult. So I want to just pause here. I don't know if this is new information that people are hearing for the first time or not. But just take a couple of seconds. And as you are taking in the passages that Dorothy read to us, some of the things that I've highlighted, I want to invite you to think about what would it be like? Because we know a lot about Martin Luther King Jr. We know an awful lot. An awful lot of someone we may, I know I never personally met him, but I almost feel like, gosh, I know him. And at times in my life, I've talked to Martin. I've told him about me. I wonder if just thinking, what would it be like? Just sit with Martin. Just you sitting with Martin. And let's assume that he knows a little bit about you because you know a little bit about him. What would that conversation be? What would that conversation look like? Would you talk about his love of fried chicken, especially his mother's fried chicken? Would you talk about his love of music and not just gospel music? We were referencing the Jewish allyship just before we started. He loved klezmer music. Oh, and my goodness, you say Mahalia Jackson to Martin Luther King, he's, Mahalia, please sing right now. He married a woman who was a trained concert pianist, Coretta Scott King. Maybe you talked to him. What was it like hanging out at Morehouse? What was it like growing up in Atlanta? And maybe you might want to just say, hey, I was thinking about one of the things that you shared, and this is what I want to share to you. Martin loved to talk to people. That was one of the problems his gatekeepers had. Martin would stop and just engage a conversation. It wouldn't be just, hey, how you doing? Okay, thank you. Let's keep freedom rides going. No, he'd want to know where you're from, how you been, what you're doing. So just think, what would that conversation be like for you? I don't know, maybe we can elicit, what do you think, Lynn and folks, if people are engaged to maybe share a little of what would that conversation that you and Martin would have, what would that be like?
I think that's a wonderful idea.
Okay. So let's take a little time and let's engage with that. We can kind of let it percolate like popcorn, with whatever kernel pops, please feel free to share. Or however, everybody that first name begins with S goes first, or however we want to do it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we can just speak or raise our hand.
Sounds great.
You can call on us.
What would your conversation with Martin be?
So this is Megs, and I would like to ask him one of, one of the burdens that he carried. He was a minister's son, which meant and then he was an educator, a young minister. His whole life, everybody in the world around him was looking at him and judging him constantly. He was never granted privacy. He's like Prince Harry, the one who resigned from the throne.
Absolutely.
And that kind of the toll that takes on the machinery of your mind and emotions. And I would love to hear about that. There ought to be a summer camp, maybe there is, for children of ministers, because it begins for them at 3. What a burden.
Oh gosh, that is so great. Absolutely. I relate so much to that conversation you'd want to have with Martin, especially preachers' kids, rabbis' kids. It's hard. Yeah, adult survivors and ministers. I love that. Yes. And there's often a overcompensation from those children to fit in, with their peers, and often going way beyond the pale and trying to fit in. So it definitely had to be difficult, but that was great. That was great. What it's like to be a son of a minister. Other conversations that people would like to have with Martin?
I would like to ask him about how he felt about training people in nonviolent activism, and then the responsibility of those people that are inspired by him to be beaten up and spit on and endangered and killed. And his volunteering himself to be abused in that way. And the deep conviction of nonviolence. And that's so amazing. And I'm sure that was an early conviction from being a minister's son and from having a relationship with God, the feeling that he had of, this is what I'm meant to do, and I'm protected by this force that's much greater than human suffering. I would love to ask him about that and how he experienced that in his darkest moments and in the moments where he saw his followers being abused. I guess I would like to ask him the way that I would want to say it is, when he made his peace with God, what was that like? What was that experience? I would love to have that kind of experience of making my peace with God. and not fearing anything that could happen to me after that.
Yeah. What was that actually like? It's a great question to ask Martin.
I would like to know how he had this vision, that active dream, that he expressed as. Can you hear me?
Yes. Say it again, though, Sashi.
I said that I would like to know how much conviction he had in his dreams about what it would be, should be, could be like, and to be able to say it with so much conviction that it's kind of become a mantra for us now. You know how he thought of it. It's very difficult to come up with an entirely different picture of the world than what really exists, because we are kind of bound by that. But to go beyond that, to really imagine and show and express and inspire people to think differently, it is something really great, I think. That
Yeah. Shashi, that seems like so much good ground to explore with Martin. The depthness of his conviction. The way he held his faith. Yeah.
I'm thinking about the yield of his body into the bed, the yield into gravity, the surrender that had to happen for him to get up. And I'm thinking a lot about, you mentioned words like power, and I'm thinking a lot about powerlessness and power and like how to hold both. It is so hard. And possibly there were very many people who felt powerless, and this was their way to get power. Oh, by, having some kind of power, it's all over the place, having some power over another class of people. And it's just super hard to hold both poles.
Mm.
It's really uncomfortable.
Mm.
Wow. Absolutely, Susan. It evokes we as human beings, we do this thing around power. We try to have more power. And that usually means or translates into guns and bombs and fighting and fists and sticks and dogs and words of hate. And he and his movement didn't choose to pick up arms. They chose a peaceful way. They taught people how to do nonviolent protests. Literally, instead of putting your body out to strike back, when you're being arrested by the police, you just let your body go limp. This is how they were taught. And as a male, conditioned in this society, that's a weak way. You know, I've been socialized to fight, to hit, to bomb, to hurt. And Martin was coming from a totally different place. Susan, I bet that conversation would be pretty awesome. Please, Liz, I see your hand.
I was wondering when he became aware of his charisma.
I think it goes back to an early age, Liz. The precociousness that I've read about him, the way that he was pushed and supported by his mother and the family and the community in Atlanta. You know, so we're talking about somebody, you know, clearly if you skip the 9th and 12th grade of your year, you were already kind of conditioned like you are special. So I kind of like to think that that's kind of where he got that at an early age.
Because somehow he came to want to stand in front of a lot of people and well, of course, the minister background in his family is that. The orator. Even musician in the tonalities of his speeches, the music of them.
Those are great questions to explore with Martin, Liz. Yeah. How do you get your groove, Martin? Where did that come from? Yeah. That cadence, which is still used now by so many speakers. And if you notice in many of the speeches in front of audiences, and this is something with a lot of Baptist preachers, black and or white, the idea of call and response. Call and response. Anybody else would like to share? Please, Rosa.
Yeah, I guess I would, assuming that Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is alive and well on some other plane of reality, that his spirit and being and presence continues in some other form, I would want to invite him to speak about what does he see today as being a continuation of his work and a source for hope. What does he see? Like, where have those seeds of nonviolence, where have they begun to sprout? I don't necessarily see them. And so sometimes I feel a bit despairing because I think I have a tremendous faith in nonviolence. And I think it takes a tremendous amount of dedication and practice and training. And so, yeah, I would want to know
where does he see faith and promise today?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, Rosa. What would Martin think of the state of affairs today?
And I don't think he would want us to give up, and I don't think he would want us to despair. And I would imagine that he would want to offer us some grounds for hope.
Mm,
I'd be really curious to hear
mm,
what he would say.
mm.
I want to comment on Liz's conversation and yours, Rosa. When Liz was asking about where he got this charisma, and I was remembering being a child in a little Baptist church, and there weren't very many young people, or it was a pretty dreary church in a way, and and the people in the church wanted me and my girlfriend to come up and sing and to do other things, and we did very, very badly. I was not a singer. They would have me play the piano, and I would have all the wrong chords. But that feeling of being prompted by community and being supported by community, that even if my singing or my playing was really, really bad, people appreciated it. And to your question, Rosa, I think that community is what supports us. And we as a community can support each other, even in times that feel dangerous and um, and uh, horrible. That the feeling of the community being right there is incredibly empowering.
Mm. Yeah. I just saw when you connected that, Liz, from the previous sharing. It's just, I got just a little tingle because, yes, community. That was so important to Martin. Building community. And isn't that hard? It's such a challenge. You know, Martin could have, before he took the mantle of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, he was fresh with his PhD. He could have been at Union Theological Seminary, become one of the most well-known, accepted, finest theologians of all times, up there with Reinhold Niebuhr and other greats, Thomas Merton. But he said, no, this is the community that's calling for me and what I want to be a part of. Yeah, thank you. Was there anyone else?
Yeah. May this cup pass. I'd love to not have to find words. But I want to kind of bring in the kind of the strands that Lynn and Liz and Rosa said, and really kind of start to say, It's like if he had access to community and resources, you know, in his day, why wasn't he telling people how easy it was for him as a black man to get? And rather than fighting for what wasn't, it's like really empowering people to get what was possible. So even in this community, it's not hard because it's safe. You know, this community of the helpers, it's safe. Any lack is my own fear, but my experience of help the helpers has been, it's kind, and that's empowering. So there's two polarities. There's fear or love. And I can pick my piece, you know. So in that way, I'd ask him, kind of like Rose's vision, you'd tell me about the goddess, you know, what's she like? The feminine and all of that, because we have come so far. I'm in Ireland and we had a gay, what you would call him president, we call him a Taoiseach, you know, prime minister. It was just from the work that people had done under the gay rights and all of that. So it was like good old Catholic Ireland embraced that and all of that. So it's like, for him, he sacrificed his life. He was a martyr. And that's the old system. So I'm thinking like, well, what would you say today? You know, how would you use your privilege and your voice to help people how empowered they are? I think it was Martin Freeman said, you know, don't be talking about what we can't do, you know. So there's not black and white, there's just us people and love, you know. It's like, how good can it get? So, Sinead Will, thank you.
Thank you, Pauline.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah. That question you'd want to explore, Martin. I don't want to say triggered. More of yeah. I mean, with all of you all's questions and conversations you'd like to have with Martin, yeah. They didn't talk about homophobia, but it was big and huge in Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Look, one of the biggest, most important organizers of the March on Washington and many of the tactics for Freedom Summers, Freedom Rides, was spearheaded by Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin was a gay black man, and he was open about it at a time when it was not good for a person to open up about that, especially in a male-dominated civil rights movement. So love to be a fly on the wall to hear what his response would be to that one. Thankfully, he did. When the FBI, even Adam Clayton Powell was, hey, words out that you and Bayard are having a relationship, and he's like, I don't care what people say. Bayard is the best person we've got to do this work. So I'm not going to abandon him. Yeah. Thanks, Pauline. Thank you.
Maybe it's time for our breakout rooms. What do you think, yeah?
Oh, yeah. God, we're just flowing. And I feel like we're all around the coffee table, you know, on the kitchen table. And we've got a pot of coffee over here, some tea over there, some croissants, some cheese. I mean, we're just kind of.
Now you're talking.
Yeah, this is great. All right, so can I invite this as a prompt, and then you can also choose whatever. But remember when I was saying that Martin had said that he had made peace with his God or with God. So, taken to the breakout. Who or what do you need to make peace with as you continue your work as a helper? Thank you, Marcia. Who or what do you need to make peace with as you continue doing your work as a helper? Okay?
And what does it mean to make peace with? I want to ask also.
Let's add that right on in. I love that. So tether that last part onto that, okay?
So we'll see you back here at 9:35.
Okay.
Welcome back. The beloved community is here.
Ah, yes.
There's a good documentary about Rustin on YouTube if anybody wants to see it.
Is it called Bayard?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, yes. Thank you for mentioning that, Lynn. Yes.
So, what happened in your breakout rooms?
Computer crashed.
Oh,
That's what
no.
So, Liz, nobody was able to really come together as a result of the crash?
I
No,
think the
No,
other
we
two
came
people
together. One of the things that came from our group was a new awareness of the early suffering that of Dr. King, and I mean, just incredible, wonder at how he moved ahead and overcame things and accomplished what he did. Despite some of his earlier travails. That was really very a teaching moment, right? Very impressive and a role model in that way, right?
Absolutely, June. Absolutely. Thank you.
I guess in our group, sorry, you phased out, Liz, didn't know what happened to you. That Marianne and I were talking about first I felt a sense of sadness about not having a leader, a role model like Martin Luther King today. That maybe there are people around, but not as ever present as he was to me growing up. And I had the privilege of going with my summer camp. I think I've talked about it at some point here, going on his march for better jobs and freedom. And I remember the speech, and I remember that hot July and people sweating and sitting down, and but it was a profound effect on me as a child, and I was pretty devastated when he was assassinated. I remember not being able to get out of bed when that happened. So I was thinking about the sadness, feeling the sadness about and I think about that often, not having a role model like that. But then we kind of edged into talking about what brings us peace, and how we can find peacefulness in our lives today, and what we can do for ourselves and others in bringing in peace and making choices on not how not to dwell in things that don't serve us, and that we have a choice in what to do and how to move forward. So thought it was good where we went to.
Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
from what your group was able to go into. Was there anything from the group I was in, Susan, Robert, Pauline, you want to speak on anything?
Talked about making peace with individuals much smaller than making peace with something vast like with God. And we talked about how I did that, how that can be done.
I love that idea of making peace, that peace is something you can make. It's sort of like art that you make it.
Well,
Yeah, I just loved the resonance that we created in the four of us, Susan, Yowell, and Robert, myself. It was just, there was lots of space between our sharing that something new emerged, you know. It was so, I felt really connected and safe. Loved it. Thank you.
oh, bless you. Well, I think we're falling close to the end time. So just curious, is anybody holding anything that's really important to pour out, to at least put out before we go our ways?
I just want to say, despite Martin Luther King's struggle with depression and all that you said, which I didn't know, despite all of that, the essence of who he was rose through it. That's the lesson for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. What we have to offer isn't necessarily that that we're carefree, that our struggles are part of our offerings.
Absolutely. Part of our offerings and are such great teachers. All of these are lessons that we learn from. So
I remember, doing a kind of interview with you back when we first began, and you were talking about how you bring the funny to the party, like everybody has something that they bring to the buffet.
yes.
And it would be wonderful to do a Help for Helpers session about what we bring to the party. Maybe you would do that for us.
I
Yeah.
would love to do that. Thank you for that invitation. And let's talk about it. Yeah. Yeah. The helper's feast. Let's
Yeah, the Helper's Feast.
yeah. That sounds great.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I really appreciated the way you brought Martin into the room in such a fresh way. I just felt he's sitting with us and he's my new friend. Just made it so personal. Thank you.
And I want to ask, I so much want to share this with other people about Martin Luther King. What is the way that I can do that? What is the way I can let others hear what we heard what's the best way to do that if I want to share that?
Well, our our meeting will be on YouTube, and you could send people the YouTube.
Okay.
And also, I'd like to request, if people want to make a contribution here, to write comments on the YouTubes, where engage other people in our conversation. So June, you could make a comment about Martin Luther King, and Dorothy, it would be wonderful to have a comment from you about making a new friend. I love that.
A great idea, Lynn. Yeah.
And how do you participate in something that becomes religious when you're an atheist in this group? would be something else that I might put in the comments about, making peace with God and let's talk about this and certain assumptions that I don't even think Martin would have done to the atheists, honestly.
Oh, it's a wonderful. I hope that you do make that comment, Liz, and I would like to respond to it. And I would respond to it in the YouTube. And that would be fabulous.
Yeah, I don't know that people realize the pressure that somehow is put by, there's a certain pressure to conform in certain ways that's implicit, maybe, and not really stated when God comes into it. And, other things too, but it's not easy sometimes.
It's not easy to live the dream, this being Martin, to live the dream of diversity, that we can have real communication across difference and that all of our ways are welcome. It's not easy to do that. It's much easier.
It was, today is Inauguration Day, God help us. And one of my most beloved moments was Barack Obama's first inauguration, where he says that we're all Americans and he includes all different religions and atheists. I couldn't believe my ears, but he actually said that. It was one of the most radical things to say as an American. In God we trust. But he said it.
That's wonderful, Liz. I would like to say two things, and I know that we are about to close. One is that I really value religious freedom, including atheists. And I also specifically, given some of the potential dangers, I think it's really important. There's a book, Charlene Spretnak wrote a book called States of Grace, where she's looking at Judeo-Christian traditions, she's looking at Buddhist traditions, she's looking at Native American traditions, and she's looking at goddess spirituality. And I just want to say that we need to make sure that atheists and goddess worshipers and nature-based religions are also protected, because those are religions that tend to be very excluded. And then there is a quote that was shared in our small group that, even though it was by a theologian, it doesn't say anything about God in it. And it's the famous quote, help me out here, as you also had it, Megs. Is it Howard Thurman?
Yes.
Who said,
from the article.
Who said, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is more people who have come alive. And I just feel we all need to come alive as much as we can. And and for some people, God works. For some people, the universe works. For some people, the goddess works. And for some people, humanism works, or whatever it is that our values are. And here's to diversity of thought and belief. Thank you all so much.
Wonderful closing remark, and see you next week. Thank you so much, everybody.
May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy. Thank you so much for the time.
And thank you so much today.
Have a wonderful Martin Luther King Day today.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Happy birthday, Lynn.
Yeah.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, right? Yay.
Thank you.
Yay.